Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot for having us. We really appreciate any chance we can get to talk to folks about diving. And before we get started, I want to ask,
Can everybody hear him?
can you hear me?
Okay.
I'll speak up. I want to ask, just a show of hands, who is certified to dive? Who has been through a class and dives? About half. Great. Out of that group, in the last year, have you been underwater diving? Dropped off a little bit. Have you been diving in Alaska? 1, 2, 3. Excellent. 4. All right. I didn't think anybody would raise their hand for that because one of the questions we always get, what? You dive in Alaska? It's the first thing we get to the shop. Never knew you were here. Most of our marketing is word of mouth, and as soon as someone walks through the door that hits Fairbanks, knows the dive community, they get out to the shop, say, never knew you could dive in Alaska. So yes, we dive in Alaska, and no, our brains aren't frozen. 90% of my dives are in cold water. I've dove under the Chukchi sea ice at 28 degrees, and I was comfortable, and we're going to talk about that when we present tonight. Before we do that, I want you to know this is pretty informal, so if you got a question, yell out when you have the question, okay? Not a lot of us here. We can get you answered up real quick. As mentioned, let's see. Can we cut the lights before we start? Or lower them a little bit? Oh, yeah, this is it.
Okay.
Okay. So, yeah, as mentioned, 25 years ago, we started with a compressor that one of the Wisenhams sold me out of the back of Beaver Sports, the shop. We put it in a garage and started teaching for NAUI, the National Association of Underwater Instructors. The different agencies don't matter. They're just different teaching philosophies. We now teach for PADI, which is really a promotion that is worldwide. And I bet you out of everybody that raised their hands, 9 out of 10 are PADI certified. Is that the case?
Anybody not PADI certified?
Some NAUIs out there? NAUI? Yeah, and I teach a number of agencies, and they're just different philosophies. NAUI's nice because they have a lot of freedom for the instructor. PADI has it set up in modular system, so the customer can come in, start, stop, go to other events in their life, come back, pick up right where they stopped. Test the Waters has 5 active instructors part-time. We just got a new cadre that started. And what we're going to introduce to you is how you get started, kind of cultivate through the ranks to becoming a certified diver. What are some of your opportunities in Alaska? We have a public safety team that's called upon just about every month to go look for something or bring something out of the water. We'll talk a little bit about that. Throughout the years, we've had a number of reality shows knock at our door and say, hey, can you do this? And we never say no. We just say, well, we'll give it a try. And we'll show you a little bit of that. We also co-teach with the university research class. Every spring semester, we take groups down to Kasutsina Bay Lab. It's the NOAA facility. And we'll talk about that as well. Right? Did I miss something?
Nope. Did more than I thought.
So, yeah, the first thing is, where do we go diving in Alaska? A lot of the places are pretty far flung. K Bay down in Homer is one. Arctic Ocean under 12 feet of ice is another spot. But we do a lot of, and we don't have the little corner slide to start us off in the corner, right? This
Nope.
is it, what
Yep,
we see?
we're fine.
It's what we get? Okay, if you can push and I'll.
Okay.
There we go. So that's your first image of diving in Alaska, sitting in a chunk of ice, frozen brain, watching a sled dog team go by. And this is actually at Ice Alaska. We do a lot of ice diving there, and I'll bring up ice diving here in a minute. Next slide. But the first thing you got to realize is 90% of the folks that show up at our doorstep are students. And what we do is get them book work or computer work to get them ready to dive in Alaska. And believe it or not, most of them, after they talk to us and we brainwash them, get them ready, will certify in the state. For a long time, we were sending people to warm water areas, but more and more now, with the technology of the dry suits, and we'll show you that, we get people from beginning in the pool all the way through to their open water certification during about a month to 3 month time period. Next slide. Once they're done with book work and we practice skills in the pool, we call that the lab. Make all our mistakes in the pool, we take them to open water. And minimum, we get them to show us those basic skills, there's about 30 of them combined, to make sure they can problem solve underwater if they run into problems with their life support system, which is the Scuba, self-contained breathing apparatus. We take them to a local pond, and the military's been really nice to us. We got a pond right across the highway. The first step out of the pool, we take away the walls, turn out the lights, lower the temperature of the water, and put them in a bigger pond. Next. Some of the other spots, we have a high altitude dive that we take folks about 3 hours south of Fairbanks to Summit Lake. Is everybody familiar with that big lake that you drive along the edge? Unbelievable visibility, up to 80 feet, and it's all relative. That's really good for us in the state. And this lake is pretty cool because we have a run of sockeye salmon in there in the fall. We have big schools of whitefish that spawn on these points and rock break bars that attract big lumber and lake trout. So there's not a lot to see in the lake, but what you do see is pretty awesome in big numbers. Next slide. Oh, and then we actually take people to the top of Everest. This shot always reminds me. We take folks down to Valdez, and the city, this is the city docks over to the right of this slide. This is an area that the city has put in
Kayak launch.
Yeah, a launch and stairway with diving in mind, but mainly kayak launch. And the cove is usually a dump for all the snow. And most of the time, we can walk right to our little beach to do our training. But there are years when we put our backs to it and either shovel like crazy to get a trench to water, and no kidding, 12 feet at times, or we get the city to come in with a front end loader and get us an access point. But saltwater diving right in Valdez is pretty awesome in the winter. Summer, we lose all kinds of visibility, so we avoid that and stay in our local lakes and ponds. Next slide. So the first thing you want to ask yourself is, how can this be comfortable? You're diving in cold water. And we don't go outside at 50 below unless we dress for it, right? We put on the parka, good wool hat, warm long johns, and attack the day. The same thing for cold water diving. We're packaging up our body in a dry suit. Do you want to take it from there and introduce dry suit and wetsuit?
No, I'm not a dry suit diver.
Okay. I'm going to show the
I don't go
wetsuit
cold.
with you, and then talk about that, and then we'll introduce the dry suit.
This is a wetsuit. This is what I wear when I go warm water diving. This is a 5 millimeter. This is what I wear in the pool. But I've also worn this in the Atlantic, in Maine in November, going diving for lobster. And I was fine in this suit, which was really surprising for me because I am one of the coldest people I know. But Mitch is a dry suit diver, which you will not see me in unless it's an ultimate emergency.
And I'm a dry suit diver because I'm more of a wimp than she is. No kidding, I get cold really easily.
But I also like to look like a robot, so that's why I wear this particular one.
80-degree water at an atmosphere or two, that's 30 to 60 feet depending on the atmosphere, you literally have compression of that wetsuit and you get cold within 45 minutes. At least I do. I was in Hawaii on a research dive, and I'm at the end of the dive with a bunch of other divers, shivering like crazy, and these divers are saying, you're this big, rough and tumble Alaskan cold water diver. What are you wimping out for? I don't get wet when I dive. I put on a dry
His
suit.
robot suit.
And the dry suit is a capsule from the neck to the wrists, feet, completely sealed. I tap into the cylinder that I dive to add air to alleviate the pressure as I go deeper underwater. I also have a vent that I can release the air as I come back up through the water column. I have dive wear, underwear, non-compressible, that lofts and keeps me warm. So as any Alaskan knows, I dress for what I'm doing. And unbelievable how long I can stay underwater in one of these suits. This is a 7 mil, 5 mil. This is one of our newest suits. And no kidding, under ice conditions, half atmosphere to about 30 feet, I can stay in for 2-3 hours and not get cold. And I'm not adding some type of inert gas. I don't have any kind of warm water going through the suit. It's just captured air between me, lofted dive wear, and this capsule. Question?
How much does it weigh?
Yeah, so some of them depends on.
Mitch, could you repeat the question?
Yeah, how much does the suit weigh? Some of them, depending on the material, can weigh fairly, quite a bit. This is probably 11 pounds. Crushed neoprene and vulcanized material, heavier, different type of diving that requires, but this has a loft to it, not only with the air I put in the suit, but also the compression or the foam neoprene that keeps me insulated. Good question. Yes?
I got a couple of questions. One is, you know what the R value is in that with the air trapped inside? When you
That's a great question. I have no clue.
He asked what the R value
R
was.
value? I don't know. We can look that up.
That's a good way of putting
Well-
it. I don't think that they gauge it like that, but there's a temperature. I mean, different dry suits are better for different levels of cold.
So this is a foam neoprene. There's crushed neoprene. Different manufacturers make the stuff differently, and they guard their secret recipe with their lives. They don't tell you what or how they make this.
How thick is it?
So it varies, but this one's about 5.5 millimeters.
It's about the same as the wetsuit, but it completely seals the water out, so you're not getting wet. And this particular brand of suits has inside of it, there's a hard part right here, and so you can put dry gloves on really, really easily, which means your hands aren't getting wet either, and that's his favorite aspect of that particular line of suits.
For years, my hands would just ache because they'd be wet gloves, they'd be dry. Now I encapsulate my whole body, and I add a mask that covers all my face. I never touch the water. Another question.
Pretty crude, so the R value, you can estimate, I can do it by just dividing the thickness by the thermal conductivity, which you can look up in the properties book, so I'm just gonna kind of do that. But question for Kate, so with your wetsuit,
Let me give you the mic.
Yeah, I'm hard of hearing, so I'm
I got it.
only getting parts of your question.
How long is it?
Kate, with a wetsuit, so can you go into, say, 35 or 40-degree water with a wetsuit and be comfortable?
I can go into probably 50-degree water in that wetsuit, which is a 5 millimeter. It also is a semi-dry, so it's got gauntlets on my ankles and my wrists, so it doesn't let the water fluctuate as much as other suits, this particular suit. And I am warm, and what I'm doing is my body's warming up that layer of water in between the neoprene and myself, and that's what generates the heat. So the less water that fluctuates through my suit, the warmer I am.
The way this is working is she's warming up the water, and if it stays in there and stays warm, she doesn't have to rewarm
And
new
then
water.
we have the cheater way of doing that because I don't generate a lot of body heat. So if I need to prep this before I get in really cold water, I can put hot water inside my suit so that my body's not having to warm up the cold water additionally. So it makes me warmer that way. And then I do get cold hands and feet, but I do not like being in a dry suit. That restriction around my neck drives me crazy. It's just not my thing. And it's not everybody's thing. I prefer warm water and I prefer tropical fish, and
Wait until you see what I see
What he
in cold
likes.
water.
very, very different.
I'm colorblind, and tropical fish,
To get dressed on the average.
How long does it take for me to get dressed in that?
Yeah. I mean,
4 minutes.
and you're all ready to go in.
Yep. 6 minutes if I have to put on everything. It doesn't take me very long. He's even faster in his dry suit. But I've also been doing it for a long time. Students typically take 20 minutes to half an hour to put on gear.
and it comes with practice. I mean, there's certain steps, and once you get the steps down, like anything, it's easy.
Do they cost?
That's a
Ooh,
great
that's
question.
a good question.
We get that a lot.
How much
it
do they
depends.
cost?
It depends. So I'm going to let Katie
This
answer
is
that.
$400. This particular suit from this particular company, typically wetsuits, because the neoprene technology's actually changed a lot over the years. My dad was a diver very long ago, and neoprene didn't stretch at all. So it's nice to have stretchy neoprene. That dry suit is just under $3,000.
Ooh.
Don't touch that, but don't hurt that. But they vary. Dry suits start at about $1,200 to $1,500, and that's a pretty low-end dry suit. The expensive part of a dry suit is the zipper, which is about $400 to $600 depending on the brand. But the highest end of those dry suits is about $5,000. So our rental fleet of 28 dry suits is a large investment in a lot of different style dry suits. But when we teach this university class, which you will see shortly, we are outfitting somewhere between 20 and 30 people in head-to-foot scuba gear. So it's a lot of equipment involved. That's what these are.
What's the upkeep cost on scuba diving as a hobby? What's the upkeep cost on scuba diving as a hobby, like refilling oxygen tanks, replacing damaged gear?
Great question.
You don't have to own your own gear, you can rent. A typical tank, and it's not oxygen, just to clarify that, oxygen gets toxic, so it's compressed air.
It's
this air, it's just cleaned a lot and then compressed
Compressed.
into a cylinder. A cylinder runs between $10 and $15 pretty much anywhere on the planet. And if you own your own cylinder, it costs $10 to $15 to get it filled. So you can choose which way to go. A basic startup package costs about $2,000, but you don't need, and that would be regulator, all the equipment that you needed to do this except for a dry suit. I'm not counting that in that. Dry suits are a totally different thing.
And we tend to get people through the course first. Now you like it. You want to go see the other 70% of the world. You start doing trips or you start diving in warm water. You try some cold water diving. You rent that stuff. You slowly buy maybe a regulator first, then a computer, mask, snorkel fins,
But
that
the
type of thing.
upkeep, once you're certified for life. We very much recommend that you do a refresher if it's been a while since you went diving. But most people that I know don't travel or own all their own gear. They rent it, or it's included in their dive package. And that's pretty common. But we do recommend that if you're going to start buying gear, you start with a computer to begin with, because that calculates, it's your brain underwater. And then a regulator. You can piecemeal it without just going, hey, I'm spending a car to get scuba gear. Good question.
Yeah, really good question. So a lot of our diving's done off of small boats, little Zodiacs, not only locally here, but also down in Kasutsina Bay and Prince William Sound. First and foremost, we are a training agency or training center, and we teach from beginning, open water, discovering the beginning of scuba.
Or kids trying it out.
All the way up through instructor. We just finished a course with 6 instructors and plan on doing that more and more. So most of what we do underwater is with students, but we do take folks to warm water destinations all over the Caribbean, South Pacific,
Fiji. That was a great trip.
Yeah. But mostly we dive here in Alaska, and this is a shot of keel ice in the Beaufort Sea, 200 miles north of Prudhoe Bay. And basically they sent us down 15 feet of ice that was melted about the size of a manhole on a street manhole cover down through the ice to do some experiments and map the keel ice that we were on. And the cool thing about this is we have these amazing images of, it reminded me of Montana, big sky country, unlimited visibility. It just could not believe that I was looking through water. This was the clearest that I've seen water in a long, long time. It was as if we were flying. And anytime we go under ice, and I'll talk about that more here, we tether ourselves because here in Alaska, 90% of our ice dive is in fresh water and it's with lower visibility. They dive in Antarctica, the visibility is unlimited and they don't tether. But what we do up here in Alaska is we'll prep the site by putting a map to get home by. And this map is nothing more than concentric rings on the snowpack with spokes leading to our entry-exit hole. And that entry-exit hole is basically where we leave and come back to. Now the map is our guidance if we get lost or turned around. We can actually drop down into deeper water, look up, and as these lights kind of show, give us a lit direction back home to our entry-exit hole.
And let me interject here. One of the most popular things about diving here in interior Alaska is the clarity of our ice. That's why we have the ice diving championships and all the carving and
Ice
what
carving,
you see, the
yeah.
ice carving. It's because our ice is so clear. So one of the things that he's seeing is all that light that comes through, and that's not true for everywhere on the planet. And so we have a lot of people from everywhere on the planet come up in the winter. We probably do 10 to 15 ice trainings per winter.
And now more and more folks are just showing up because they want to go for a swim with us.
Yeah, they
don't
want to see
the
what's under there,
certification,
and they
They just want to go underwater.
check it out, and they think it's a great adventure. I, on the other hand, think sitting in the truck that's warm sounds like a great place to be. I also will say that the people doing shore duty, having done that for 10 years, it's 40 below out there. It's cold. The water is 35-ish. So it's much, much, much warmer in the water. So I am making a dumb choice by not getting in the water. It's much warmer under there.
We used to cut off our training sessions at 10 below until this. You guys try these Eskimo huts? Anybody been in one of these? We now, with a little heater, dive at 40 below air temp because we'll put this hut over the hole and we won't have to deal with the 40 below. Like Kate says, we're dealing with 32. The ice is just about forming on our hole when we're going in and out, but nice and toasty in our little capsule. So now when students or potential students call, they say, well, what's your cutoff temperature? No
There
cutoff
isn't one.
temperature. But it does take a lot of energy and a teamwork and a big
And
saw.
a 6-foot chainsaw.
And we really appreciate Rod Saw Shop for getting us this large saw. This is what we get through 2 to 3 foot of ice anytime we dive here in the interior after November. It starts thickening up quite a bit. Some of the other tools, bars, but really strong backs. Lots of team members in their 20s to help get rid of the ice at the entry-exit hole. So a lot of the times divers will take light down with them. We have a support person on the surface guiding and
That's the
signaling.
cold person, short stick person. They drew the short straw.
What's that? Yeah.
They drew the short straw. They're the short person at 40 below, freezing.
But they are communicating with the underwater team. And I'll share a little story with you in a little bit. But for years, I've been training ice divers, public safety divers, firefighters with tactile signals. The line is how we communicate. So many pulls mean so many signals, right? We got 2 pulls, I'm okay. 3 pulls, bring me home, that type of thing, okay? And this is why. There are times when you leave that hole, there's someone standing at the entry-exit hole, and swim off, there's one of those lines we create. You can get a little disoriented, and you want to keep communication with your surface support folks. Now, I did work for a research group that had more money than we do, and we had comms. We were hardwired into the helmets on these different, let me fix this real quick, on these different colored comm lines. So this line here is yellow. I know that because I've been using this slide for a long time. Okay, so a BBC channel crew, television crew's working on a documentary, and they give us each colored lines, and I'm yellow.
So the funny thing about the colored wire, he's the yellow diver, and there's a blue diver and a green diver. Mitch is completely colorblind. So those are words that mean absolutely nothing to him. And by nothing, I mean there's no frame of reference, because if you've never seen color, you can't tell.
And for years, I'm training with divers on tactile signals. Are you okay? Is something that is just 2 pulls. And basically, the film crew kept saying, yellow diver, you can talk. Because they were saying, are you okay, yellow diver? I was filming the crew coming to me, and I would tug on my line. And they were, this guy's slow. You can talk, yellow diver. So they had a lot of fun with that night, where yellow diver could actually talk. So
There are many opportunities for adventure. One of the things, and he mentioned it before, is we get these phone calls at least once, if not 3 or 4 times a year, from somewhere, usually in the lower 48, usually in California, where they call and say, okay, hey, we want you guys to film this. I know it's 40 below under the water. And I say, well, in Alaska, if it's 40 below under the water, we call that ice. It's not 40 below under the water. And then they come up with this great idea. One year they wanted a guy to jump into an open body of water naked, and then come running out and jump into a truck. And I said, well, okay, here's the problems with that. And there were a few. It was 30 below that particular week, and they were flying up. They were already bought plane tickets, and they were on their way. So this is a production company coming from LA, bringing the talent, which is the guy who thinks he's going to dive naked into what eventually was the Chena River at 30 below. That is not what ended up happening. But again, we say yes, and then our challenge is to figure out how can you make that shot happen. So what we've learned over the years is, please send me what you think this is going to look like and what you want it to look like, and then we'll try to figure out how we can logistically make that work, even though that's not at all remotely possible.
So if you're a certified diver and you've got 800 dives all over the world, how long would it take to certify one in a dry suit?
Well,
a session in the pool.
it's
for safety
performance-based.
issues. Yeah, everything's performance-based. It's a good question.
But typically, it's an orientation in the pool, which is about 2 to 3 hours, and then a minimum of 2 to 3 dives in open water. But again, it's performance-based. We want to know that you're comfortable, and that's one of the things I really love about teaching here. I've taught in other places where we do the entire open water course in 3 days. Here at Test the Waters, we do it over the course of a couple weeks, so you get a lot more thorough knowledge. So I'm much more comfortable putting my name on your certification card that says you can go dive somewhere else than I was with a 3-day education where I'm saying, here you go, please don't hurt yourself diving somewhere that you're not qualified to dive. Because up here, we do have such thorough and kind of intensive environment that that you are really well trained. So it is performance-based, but 1 pool session and a day in the open water is the short answer to that question, typically. But if you aren't doing well that first day, we're going to take you back to open water until you feel like you have mastered those skills.
I would expect that.
So we just skipped the cool video of a tractor and trailer driving over me. We got a call from Ice Road Truckers. They said, hey, take a look at our opening scene. And I don't know if you guys watch some of the shows that are done in Alaska, but they had a toy truck going across the window pane, and they said, we'd like you to get in the river, local river by town, and film. And you guys know what the Tanana River looks like in the middle of March, and film a truck driving over you. And I said, well, first, you're not going to get me in moving water under the ice with snow that you're not going to be able to see this truck. But do I have a deal for you? So we used Birch Lake and carved out what I called the coffin, but a thinner layer of ice as a pane to put a camera through. And then we actually shot the truck running at us.
You used the flame thing to shine up
To-
the ice to make it even clearer so that it was a really clear shot for the camera to see the truck. But
Yep.
it was all completely manufactured. Just the truck drove over him so many times, and that's what the video that you're not going to be able to see is. That you could feel the entire lake starting to shake. And the funny thing is the production team showed up with a semi and a huge trailer, like a motorhome that they wanted to drive out on the lake that was the emergency shelter. But that got stuck as soon as they drove onto the lake. But the semi didn't get stuck, but the semi had to go pull the trailer off. And then everybody parked in the middle of the lake right in the same spot, which is
The weak
a great
spot
shot.
where the truck kept driving
Yeah.
over me under, you know,
I
3
have
feet
some
of
really
ice.
good films of this is what not to do.
And it was really cool because the crew was all from California, and they were all dressed head to toe in
matching,
Eddie Bauer
matching, you know,
parkas, and all
matching
the
California
Alaskans-
style warm or cold water gear. They were freezing. to
and
death.
all the Alaskans were dressed in Carhartts and fur. It was awesome. You could tell an Alaskan from one of the crew members. But we've worked with a number of these folks, and I'm telling you, the cameramen are the toughest, unbelievably dedicated people I've ever seen. They are amazed that I get underwater and do this under the ice, and I'm amazed that they deal with all that equipment in those harsh conditions, and it works. And you never hear them complaining.
Ever.
And
The
it's
camera
cold,
people are
and
the
they're
rock
always
stars.
smiling. I think they're on something. It's unbelievable. We set up the last one recently here for, believe it or not,
Beyond
Bionic.
Bionic.
Google it. It's a Navy, it's a British secret SEAL guy that is matching the skill set of different animals. So he jumps out of a plane to beat the dive of a falcon. He runs faster than an ostrich, and he swims under the ice in a wetsuit to see if he can beat a seal. So that nuttiness was just this last fall. So you start to ask yourself, how dangerous is scuba diving? And statistically speaking, it is safer than playing golf. So one of the things we really stress when you take a course is that you have to gain this mastery. You have to be able to problem solve underwater, and mastery is repeatability, fluid, comfortable with not only the equipment that you have on board, but also to work with another diver, because we train you as a buddy team. Now, more and more, the industry is going to self-reliant certification, but it's still to train with another diver. Another aspect of what we've been doing, so working with the Discovery Channel and a bunch of these production
So
companies
scuba
is
diving
a
isn't
lot of
as
fun.
dangerous as driving on the ice. Please don't do this.
For many, many years, the Fairbanks Police Department and troopers and others have called me, can you find this weapon? Can you find this person? Can you find this vehicle? So over the years, I had a reputation of finding things underwater, and more, actually, it's almost to the point where it's at least 1 or 2 times a month we get a call from a diamond ring that just slipped off my hand to tracked vehicles. That's a big one. Hey, my tractor went in the pond and I got to get it. And we actually attach lift bags and do the math. Who was doing the math for the R value? Yeah,
Ron.
figuring out buoyancy and Archimedes' principle is one of the team requirements. We have a public safety team now, a number of divers that are on a list that get called when a vehicle goes in the water, and those folks are trained, highly trained, to get in their scuba gear and get underwater in case of a rescue. Now, up here in Alaska, we're not in the rescue mode. We're in a recovery mode, and one of the challenges is to bring up a vehicle. This is a truck that was in the Chena Lakes Park, 500 yards offshore. The DEC, Department of Environmental Conservation, and others, because of Elodia, I don't know if you know about the invasive aquatic plant we have. I briefly talk about that. Wanted us to bring this truck up out from the bottom, onto the surface, and float it to shore. So we said, yeah, we can do that. We never say no. We always figure it out. And the team went down, attached a number of bags to the vehicle, and these are the bags set up. 2,000-pound lift bags with 80 cubic foot cylinders to bleed air in to expand. And each one of those bags is attached to an axle. The truck is turtled. It's upside down. When it went through the ice, it flipped and was in 30 feet of water, brought it to the surface, and this is where we're just about touching the bottom. So we're close to shore here, and we're going to attach it to a tow line with a wrecker and drag it up onto shore. This is pretty common in the Chena River. We get called out over by Pike's Landing at least once a year because someone pushes.
That is not an ice bridge. That is that is misleading. Please don't drive on that.
Yeah.
The amount of vehicles that we pull, it's an every year event. And this truck was last Friday that they just pulled this truck out of Chena Lakes. It was stolen in December. It was stolen in December. Nobody knows whether that is, who knows what happened, but the truck was 500 yards and left. They started cracking through the ice and people jumped out of the truck, so they were fine. The keys were still in the truck because the owner said, hey, when you get the truck out, can you please go get my keys for me? My mailbox key is on there and they're charging me a lot of money if I lose it. So it took 6 months for us to be able to get in there and get it out, but we do this pretty much once a month.
Another aspect to what Test the Waters has been doing for the last 20 years is we co-teach with the university and the research spring course. So a research dive course. This is the view from Kasitsna Bay. It's a NOAA facility. Pretty magical spot for spring break. We take up 15 to 25 students each spring break, and they learn not only to take care of themselves underwater, but to use scuba diving as a research tool to collect data. Let's see if this video works. And this just gives you an idea of what they're swimming through. This is more in the summer. We have now a summer class. In the spring, we don't have all this growth. Unbelievable amount of kelp that grows in these areas.
Kasitsna Bay Lab is right outside of Homer.
Right across from Homer Spit over towards Sildovia.
You hear that sound? Is anybody afraid of sharks if they go diving? We sound like Darth Vader underwater. So we're really loud and sharks don't like that. So we're lucky if we get to see them.
Yeah, we are diving open circuit, so we exhale into the surrounding water, and that's what you're seeing with those bubbles, the captured air from the cylinder. So everybody doing okay? We still got a few more slides. Good. Some of the critters. I forgot the name of this one. Lionfish jellies, up to the size of a 55-gallon drum. Now, I'm not a photographer, and I'm really bad at underwater images, so bear with me on some of these. The really good ones are stolen from other students. We don't have many now. They've been hit with a virus. The Pycnopodia is what's called the sun star. And out on the Aleutians, we've seen them as big as the round, the size of a 55-gallon drum as well. These are kind of the bad starfish. These guys eat everything. And they march along the bottom on tube feet and dig for clams. And that's what this one on the bottom's doing. And no kidding, they are big animals. They're really cool. One of the really cool little guys that you have to slow down and look for, especially if you're colorblind, is the nudibranchs. And these nudibranchs are nothing more than snails without a shell. And they're really colorful. They're still naming some new ones. The different types that we see commonly in Alaskan waters are here, all the way down through the southeast. Our big animals and what we lack in the pretty colorful coral fish, we got big things, right? Jellyfish the size of 55-gallon drums, starfish as big around as a 55-gallon drum, and sea lions. And it's amazing how an animal the size of a mini pickup truck can sneak up on you. So a lot of the times when I'm doing our research dives, the collectors of the data need me to run behind with a camera, and they just say, here, push this button. And so I'll film them. And here's an example. I told them, wow, did you guys see the sea lions? I go, you're ridiculous. There's no sea lions down here. They never saw them on the surface, never saw them underwater. So I made them a little bet. I won't tell you what I won. But I captured what they kept missing. And here we're doing nothing more than a little survey on a rock jetty. And as soon as we get down there, most of the rockfish get curious and they come in to see what we're doing. So this is all the different species. We got a couple different species of rockfish coming down to check us out. And the guys are collecting benthic data. This guy's clearing his mask. Where's the sea lions? And I had to use this video to win my bet, to show them that sea lion was there, because after this video we came up, nope, they never saw the sea lion.
And you never do. It's really funny. You can tell people this, and we tell people this especially when we're going to Whittier, and they're like, there aren't any sea lions. And again,
and these are juveniles. These are little guys. We've had bull sea lions 3 times this size come in with students, check them out. Students never knew they were there. It's another common animal that does it is the sea otter. We'll see that the bottom's kicked up, and you'll look around, who's finning the bottom? It's a sea lion exploring and diving with you, and you never get to see them. Dungeness crab are always cool to go after. There's actually a season on these guys. You look for the little dimples. They burrow in to the sand and sit, and as soon as you swim up to them, they'll jump up and take off running. And the first time I ran into this, I was diving with a group out of Juneau. I'm going, why are they wasting all their air swimming like crazy after these little crabs? Until that night we had a crab feed, and the next 3 days I was swimming like crazy after these little crabs. And they'd jump up and take off, and you would just burn a tank down chasing after them. But boy, were they worth it. And these are fairly shallow, 25 feet, 30 feet. You find them up to 60 feet commonly in the sand. Another crab that we run into is red king crab, and we find them as shallow as 50 feet. And what they'll do is they kind of hunker down, and they're the bad crabs. They're tough. You swim up to them. Unlike the dungies that jump up and take off, these guys will just hunker down and say, yeah, come grab me, try it. And they just sit there. You can pick them up and bring them home. Pretty cool. Number of different anemones, not as plentiful or colorful as the Caribbean, but if you look closely, they're pretty cool animals. This is a common one, a plumas anemone, and what we find commonly with these guys, they can move, but for the most part, they'll find a structure to settle on, rock outcropping, a wreck, a piece of junk, a tire that someone's thrown in the water, sand flat tire covered with these beautiful anemones up to 3.5, 4 feet, that big around, just amazing. Deeper down, we got sea pens, another cool critter. Lots of different fish from gunnels. And some of these fish you got to really look close into the little cracks and crevices under the kelp. Common sculpin on the bottom. Kelp greenling are really common in Kachemak Bay, Prince William Sound, in some of the shallower dive sites we visit. Cucumbers and what are these guys, Kate? Urchins. Thank you. And octopus. And octopus, I got a little trick for octopus. A lot of divers you start talking to, they have a stick or they use Clorox to hunt these guys, and they're very intelligent animals. And it's really easy to bring them out and visit with them. They're curious. So if you don't have a dry glove and you can take your glove off, the easiest way is to lay your hand outside their den, and you got to be a little patient. They get curious, and a tentacle will come out and start exploring and checking your hand out, and literally come all the way out and check you out. This is one we found last spring. You can see its eye right here. These are well camouflaged. Chromatophores color this thing up and camouflage it. And this little guy's tucked in a crevice. And we have all these other divers done with their dive up on the surface in boats. So I drop back down. I see the other diver shows me there's where the octopus is. Can't get it out. It's tight in there. And I just start tickling it. And it starts getting curious. And as I get more and more comfortable bringing it out underneath from the rock, you can see here's its mantle, legs are coming out, until I bring it to the surface and it gets really pissed. And it starts taking my mask and my regulator out of my mouth. So I let him go, he takes off. But as
When
I was
they're red,
bringing
that
him,
means they're mad.
yeah. And they get these devil horns and real red, and they let you know that they're pretty strong. We brought it up to show everybody, and that was the shot before he took off. And I think
That's the end.
that is the end. If you have any questions. Good? One more?
How far down can you dive before the pressure starts to get uncomfortable?
So the pressure doesn't get uncomfortable because we equalize, and that's part of the training. You learn to equalize your air spaces. If you're healthy, your sinuses equalize naturally. Ears, you learn a technique called the Valsalva to equalize. Other air spaces, got to work on those. Dry suit, you add air to the dry suit to counteract the pressure. Every foot of water is 0.455 pounds per square inch pushing on you, and we're already under pressure, 14.7 pounds. So take that atmosphere down to 33 feet. Every 33 feet, you're getting that much more pressure, and you equalize that. Diving recreationally allows you to go to 100 to 130 feet, and that is the limit for recreational no decompression, meaning when you're at 130 feet, you can turn around and head home without stopping. Now, I don't advise it. That's a deep dive, but you don't have to stage decompress. And we can get into that, what you're doing when you decompress. But for the most part, recreational divers run the range from 30 to about 80 feet, commonly on a dive trip. That's
I'm uncomfortable at 130 feet. My body doesn't like it very much because there is a lot of pressure and everything kind of slows down a lot for me. You're losing a lot more air, so I don't particularly like that. There's not as much to see. Most of the life is up higher, and the light all filters out, so if you don't have a light, you're not seeing much of anything anyways. But I'm just uncomfortable at 130 feet. At about 100, I'm good. Anything past that, I can start to tell, like my whole body just starts going, you know what, this is enough. You need to go up higher. So I don't even need to look at a gauge to know, because I am uncomfortable at that depth. It's a good question.
But more and more the agencies are starting to teach deeper dives, so you can get a deep dive certification down to 200 and 250 feet. And again, it's more training to get you there.
Yeah.
On a mixed gas. Yeah.
When you're diving in fresh water in Alaska, what's the chances of picking up Giardia and various things like that?
Oh, good question. So a lot of the times, your chance of picking up Giardia is just like, you know, canoeing and swimming in our lakes and ponds with, what's the schist? Yeah, there's always a chance. We don't see much of it, and you know, a lot of the times when you're putting a regulator in your mouth, it's in your mouth and stays in your mouth, but there's always a chance. Good question. Don't let that scare you off of diving in Alaska. Yes?
Ron?
I wouldn't think this is your bailiwick, but my only time, quote, breathing underwater was many years ago with my roommate who was a lobster fisherman. He had a compressor mounted inside an inner tube and a long hose, so we just swim around, the inner tube would float behind us on the surface. Does anybody do that anymore?
More and more, the federal government is getting into that because they found they're losing freshwater mussels. There's a number of species of freshwater mussels in the Midwest and East Coast that we're losing because of pollution and habitat loss. So they are diving with hookah, where they have compressors sending air down a tube, and they're in rivers working on the species that they're trying to identify or find. And that's getting, in fact, I'm going back east to teach a class in river diving with that type of system. You know, there's harvesters that use it.
Dredgers.
Dredgers use it. Yeah, now researchers more and more. Good question.
Any other questions? I wanted to mention also, there's some great skills that you learn scuba diving. I just got back from the Colorado River in June, and I was the raft that flipped. I was the only scuba diver in the raft. I was the one that got caught in the wash and got sent down to the bottom, came up under the raft, had to get out from under the raft. I was a scuba diver. I was used to being under the water. I didn't panic. Everyone else was screaming and hollering and yelling, and they even landed on the shore. So it was really a good tribute to me as far
If
as
I can, I
scuba
want to
diving.
say
It's a
one more
good
thing.
Just having a back pocket even if you're clean.
And especially for kids, because we do train, SEAL team is 8 to 10, and that's in the pool. And what it teaches is conservation. It teaches responsibility. It teaches a personal investment in what it is. Because if you teach kids how to dive, what they do is love it. Even if they only do it once or twice, they remember it. I mean, you remember when you got certified. I remember my instructor, I got certified in 1980. And I still remember that woman. I remember her name. I remember every open water dive I had, and I don't know why I didn't do it when I was 12. I should have started way sooner than I did,
And
which
we-
ages me quite a bit.
And we
But-
didn't mention we work with the Wounded Warriors quite frequently. We do Adventure Quest where the guys getting back off the front line need to decompress. Actually, they find getting underwater and kind of relaxing in that type of environment really works. So
And
700
physical.
and something guys back from the first wave in Iraq went through our course. We have a Warrior Quest coming up here this month, right?
Next
Where
week.
20 GIs at a pop will go through, and they just love it. They've ran a little run test that skeet shooting, cross country skiing, rock climbing, and scuba went way off the charts. Some of these guys never have been in the water to swim, let alone scuba dive. And you know, they're 6-something, no neck, arms as big as my head, and you're gonna take me underwater? They love it. Once they get out, they're hooked for life. Unbelievable.
And the pressure, if they have injuries, makes them feel better. If they have backaches and stuff like that, that whole, once you equalize everything at about 20 feet, it dials in and they just want to go float off. I mean, and we have a bunch of guys that's all they do is just drop down and stay under and breathe and float because it's a meditative state. Kara?
Yes, many of us have been fascinated by the rescue of the soccer team in Thailand. Do you have any comments on that? Their techniques or?
Yeah, can you repeat? So the question is, do I have any comments on the rescue of the soccer team that was, how they got back that far and trapped by water that had risen and trapped them from the entrance. What amazed me, and it's sad that we lost a diver. You guys recall that. We did lose a diver. When the media talks about a diver dying, that's what they say. Scuba diver dies. It's not the accident. You know, the diver's done, out of the water, getting into his car at Laguna Beach and got hit. Scuba diver dies. So it was kind of cool to see that scuba was used to solve a really scary problem. And what amazed me was that they didn't, you know, they were scratching their head thinking, well, we're going to have to train these kids to move through the water in scuba. Well, they had the rescue technique already with EMTs and how they can strap down and keep the kids on air, and then the divers would move through. And I think, I didn't really follow it too closely, but they literally had to thread the needle for some of the sections, right? So what amazed me was these cave divers. Now remember, we're scuba divers unless we're under the ice, and we want to get to the surface, unlimited air supply. It's only natural, you know, we're air-breathing mammals that we want to move to the surface. So all of a sudden, you're not on just scuba, you're trapped in a tube under rock, and dealing with that just amazed me. So to solve that problem was pretty cool, and scuba got a big way to go. You know, it's a good thing. It's kind of cool that worked out.
What's the age kids can get certified?
10 to be fully certified, 8 to do it in the pool. 8 to 10, you can do it in the pool as part of a SEAL team, and we have a pretty active SEAL team. It's fun. 10, but it's also based on their maturity and their judgment underwater. So
we sit down with the parents and any of the young kids that want to try it, and we let them know that, you know, well, we have some adults that aren't mature enough to go on scuba, but we let them know that you can start, but you might not finish until, you know, maturity catches up.
Is that an open water certification?
open water, it's a junior open water certification at 10.
Okay.
Good question.
Yes.
Test runs on improved rebreathers, Navy's cut?
Oh, I'm not, you know, I used to teach rebreather. That's a lot of work above the water. I like doing all my work underwater. So the technology's such now that rebreathers are getting more and more common, but there's still a lot of technical components to it, and we're still getting people hurt because they're getting trained and then they're not staying really regimented on the steps for rebreather diving. So yeah, the technology's really getting rebreathers into recreational diving, but we get enough with open circuit to keep people busy.
Wrecks that you wanted to dive on, you didn't want any bubbles inside the...
A lot of divers that are rebreather divers are cameramen.
I was going to say
they want to take
photographers, 'cause
photos.
the bubbles
and
don't
they can get
scare.
right up to fish. In fact, when I got certified rebreather, I was going, something's different. Well, the difference was on open circuit, I send a signal out and the fish stay away from me because
That's
I
what I was
exhale.
saying, that sound that you hear, the
Rebreather,
breathing.
I had fish hitting my mask. I was swimming through them slowly. They weren't getting out of the way. So.
Talking about starting a marine archaeology department, because they said there were 3 wrecks Steve wanted to dive on. He said the bell and the cannon are still there on one of them.
Yeah, they did a lot with sonar to map those wrecks. I don't know what wrecks they went after, but Steve here at the U at one time. I don't know if he finished that, or I know they weren't going to dive rebreathers for that. They did have a program, I think Max might know this, where they wanted to capture sea otters and they wanted to sneak underneath them, and with rebreathers, the ability to sneak under and get them in a trap. Sea otter's a big animal.
And they're mean.
During oil spill, it was the U.S. Fish and Wildlife, USGS. They have a scooter with a net on the front of it, and they use the rebreathers because your standard open circuit is too noisy.
You couldn't
So they come
sneak
up
up.
underneath and they just like big clamshell and
Yeah.
hook it, and they look very nice and cuddly, but
They're
rip my
mean.
fingers away.
Yeah, sea otters are really, really mean.
Does everybody know what a raccoon is? You ever have a raccoon on your head? Order a magnitude with a sea otter on your head.
Those teeth are nasty.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, they're cute and cuddly right up until you're right next to them, and then they're not.
Question.
Oh,
So-
that's a good question. Go ahead.
So basically what that has is a scrubber.
repeat the
When you
question.
exhale, yeah, what's a rebreather? When you exhale, we have carbon dioxide that's a poison. We don't want to deal with it on board. We use oxygen. When you exhale, that rebreather, that mechanism, scrubs and cleans that exhalation, injects a little bit of O2, oxygen, back into the breathing system. And so you're literally cycling an exhalation in a canister that you have on your back. And you don't see that video that you'd see an exhalation, bubbles coming from the dive. You don't see that because the exhalation goes in, scrubs, comes back, you rebreathe it. Rebreather. Good question. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.